Welcome to Women Talk. I'm Joyce. It's been said that women talk about everything, anything, anytime, and anywhere. Two women were standing in line at the supermarket checkout, and they began sharing stories about their mothers. After all, Mother's Day is approaching soon. So one said, "Did your mother ever give you the look?" Well, that opened up a conversation on things Mama said, and it engaged several women who were standing on the adjacent lines. Welcome to Women Talk. Today's program, we're honoring all mothers and those who played the role as mothers, such as your grandmother, your aunts, your sisters, family, or even friends. But before we start talking about what Mama said, let's meet our guests. Judy,
Hello, good morning.
say a few things about yourself so the audience knows who you are.
Well, I've been in the Senior Center for 3 years. I've enjoyed it a lot. I've been on television before, and I enjoyed that too, as a matter of fact.
Thank you. Barbara?
I'm Barbara, and I've been in the Senior Center about 3 years myself, but I've been in the town of Piscataway over 40 years, and kind of just making it here after retiring and having fun.
Welcome.
Very active Senior Center.
Welcome to you. Mayette?
Hi, I've been in Piscataway for over 30 years, and Senior Center, I only entered it once pandemic hit. So right after the center opened, I started coming in.
Okay, thank you. Now, you know, I think two of these ladies have been with us before, so you might have seen them in earlier shows. But to kick things off, it's important to note that there have been songs, since we're talking about what Mama said, there have been songs written about mothers, such as "I'll Always Love My Mama." That was the Intruders. And then you have "I Love You, Mommy." Remember that one?
Yes,
We
yes.
did that when we were small. I don't even know who the author of that one was. And then "Mama Said" by the Shirelles. Mama said there'll be days like this.
That's what I thought.
Okay. And then Stevie Wonder did "Isn't She Lovely," believe it or not, for his mother. And then it's "My Mother's Eyes." Bette Midler did that one. And Celine Dion did "A Mother's Prayer." Now, I could keep going on and on and on because I started looking at all of the songs that talk about mothers or speak to mothers. But I'd rather return to discussing the conversation that the women were having at the checkout counter. Okay? And so, ladies, I'm going to start first because I remember something my mother said, and I think I've shared it. One day, the teachers, you know, when you were in school, teachers have time off and, I don't know, conferences or whatever it is that they do. And so everyone in the class said, "I'm not going to school tomorrow because our teacher won't be here and we'll get a sub, and who wants to be with a substitute?" And so I said to my mother, "Nobody's going to be in class tomorrow because the teachers are off and we get a substitute, so can I stay home?" She goes, "Nobody's going to be in class?" I go, "Nobody. You're going to be in class. So you're not a nobody." So that went down the tubes, okay? So I realized, okay, certain things I can tell my mother, and I heard the woman talk about the look. I don't know if anybody's mother ever gave them the look.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Several times.
Okay? You could ask your mother for something. You could say something to your mother. My mother used to do this.
What in the world is that?
Okay? Because if you said, "I'm looking for something," or "Mom, could you help me?"
Oh.
Do it yourself.
Okay? So she would give us the look. But I remember, oh my gosh, so many different things she would say. Don't let me count to 3.
Sounds familiar.
Yes.
Did you get that
Yes.
one?
I did get that, yes.
Can you remember any, Judy, that your mom said?
Well, one thing she said that was very useful that I didn't always pay attention to was, if you don't have something good to say, just keep your mouth shut. And I wish that I had many a time when I realized, whoops. And I do remember my mother even saying that several times.
Yes, yes. There's a lot of similarities there. 'Cause I said the same thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I ask my mother something and say, why was this? Because I said so.
Oh, I love that one.
Because I said so. So as a child, you just kind of, okay.
No democracy here.
Right.
Okay.
She goes into that mother's knows best, right? Why do we have to do this? Because I'm your mom.
Okay, because I said so.
Because I said so. That's right. And you know, between siblings, you always sometimes fight, right? Not physically, but you know,
Verbally.
verbally.
Yes.
So she would give you the look, but if you're in church, she would pinch us because she can't yell at us in church, right? And one thing I remember distinctly is when I got married, I was staying with them. I just had a baby, so I was staying with them for a couple of weeks. My husband had to work that Saturday. And my mom said, come on, let's eat lunch, because she wants to eat everybody at the same time, right? But I said, no, I'll wait for my husband. She looked at me like, why do you have to wait for, is his stomach in your stomach? Why do you have to wait for him?
I like that one.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes she can get funny, but, you know.
Another one my mother would say when you would say, everybody's going. Everybody's going. We used to go to Adventureland. I forget what it was called in Jersey. Everybody's going. Mom, I have my money. I saved my money. Can I go? And she would say, no. And I go, why can't I go? And she goes, let me tell you something. If everybody was jumping off a bridge, you following them?
Well, as a matter of fact, my mother said roof because we lived in a big apartment building. That was 5 stories high. We didn't live near any bridge.
Okay,
They
so you lived near a
and
roof.
if they decide they're going to jump off the roof, you're going to follow them too. And that was the end of that. It was especially about parties and stuff.
Oh, yes.
She didn't trust,
Yeah.
how things would go, and she was, of course, quite right.
Well, it was interesting as you talk about parties because I finally convinced my mother to let me have a party in the house. And she said yes, it was a birthday party.
Okay.
So
How old were you?
It was in my teenage
I was
years.
just like, okay.
So I was trying to convince her to let me dim the lights. And all I wanted was a nice hue, and that was a no. That was an absolute no. And so I said, but Mom, other parties that I go to, and she said, I know birds of a feather flock together, but in this house, the lights are not going to be dimmed. And it was not until after the party, of course I didn't have the lights dimmed, but after the party I put the dim lights on and she said, oh, that looks really nice. I was like, ooh.
Did they chaperone the party or did they leave the room?
They were in the house.
Oh, okay. They were
house.
in and out of the room
Yes.
where the party was being held. I had that one time. And the soft music came up, right? So before, somebody asked me to dance, but she intercepted, and she whispered to my ear, don't get too close. I said, what?
Yes.
So like that became like that.
Oh my gosh.
Because she was watching.
Yep.
Yes.
That's why I would always fast dance. You only did fast
yeah.
dance. Because if they're watching, give me a
yes.
break. You don't even want them in the room. Okay?
Let's do a Lindy Hop.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one. Okay,
Yes, I do.
I remember. One of the other phrases, and I wrote some of them down here, my mother would say, when you're talking to her and you're asking, you would be begging for something. You bet, get out my face.
Mine was ask your dad. When you go to dad, he's going to say ask your mom.
Okay.
So what do you do?
Mine was, money doesn't go on trees. You can't go everywhere.
I love that one. Okay, I love that one. Oh gosh, but my other reflection was, and I got to turn this over. I don't know if I can say this on TV. hard head makes a soft behind.
Yes,
okay?
yes,
Now,
yes,
you
I
keep
got that
on
too.
being hard head. And to this day, I never understood what is a hard head.
Yeah.
I know what a hard hat is.
Right.
Hard
right.
head is, you know, when
Right.
you're really stubborn
Yes.
and mean and you just insist on your own dumb ideas no matter what.
And but I could never get makes us soft behind because my mother didn't hit us.
Yes, yes, yes.
She was a pincher.
Yeah, like my
Yeah,
mom.
she would pinch. And so you knew when you asked for something, you stayed a distance away from her.
Yes, yes.
So that therefore you wanted to be out of the reach of her hand. So she couldn't pinch you. Okay.
But some things my mother said seemed like the law that came down from
Absolutely.
heaven. And I can remember being in elementary school, and one thing she said to me, of course raised in the streets of the Bronx, you understand, rules were very harsh.
Yes.
She said, never ever get in a car with a man.
Oh, yeah.
You know, never. Since we didn't own a car, I
Okay.
couldn't get in a car with my father since we never had a car. So she said, never ever get in a car with a man. So one day, it was pouring rain and school let out, and I had to walk home 2 blocks. But my friend Marie Branca, who I remember so well from the 3rd grade, her uncle was the Ralph Branca from the Dodgers. Yes,
Oh,
I knew a niece of somebody famous.
Okay.
Anyway, her father was off that day, and he came with his car. And Marie said to all of the kids, including me, "Come on, pile in the car." Nobody had seatbelts then. You could just
Get
have
in.
6
That's right.
kids or
That's
something.
right.
I'll
That's
drive
right.
you all
That's
home. It's
right.
pouring. And I said, "No, my mother said I can't." So I walked home. Of course, I was soaked. My mother took off all my clothes. And when I said I didn't get in a car, and she said, "Oh, you could have." What?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they always said those things late. Okay. But if they were around today and saw what goes on today,
Boy, yes.
They would be glad that I walked home in the rain.
Yes.
Even though I was allowed to play with Marie in her house, where her father and mother were sometimes, and I was allowed to go there alone because she lived so close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that. You could have gone anyway.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Another one my mother would say, don't go looking for trouble, because we would say, I want to go out, go to a party, or I want to go across town, because as I began to get into my teenage years, my friends didn't all live locally. So they weren't my neighbors anymore. So, you know, you make friends and they live somewhere else. And so I could walk there, okay, and my mother would always go, all right, don't go looking for trouble, because it already knows your address.
Wow, I like that.
Okay?
Yeah, that is
That was
interesting.
one that used to, and then she'd ask, what's in your bag? What are you taking out with you? What is that?
Yeah. They pinpoint certain things, and it's like you pay attention to. For instance, my mother had, it's not the what's in the bag, but remember those black and white buck shoes?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my.
White
Brown
bucks.
and
Yep.
They were.
I hated them. They were heavy, and I had to wear them to school. So she went to work, so I thought. She got in her car, and when I left for school, I had on my sneakers. And she was still outside because her car didn't start that morning. So she sent me back in the house to get the black and white shoes and put them on. So I stomp upstairs and get it up there. It's embarrassing to wear those things. So I put them on and put my sneakers in the bag. And so I walked on down. I said, okay, bye, Mom. And so she said, bye. I walked down to the corner, stopped, took off the shoes, and put my sneakers on. And lo and behold, Mom her car started, and she comes around the corner and she sees me. So now she stopped.
Busted.
Oh, my God.
I had to put the shoes on again, and she took me to school instead of letting me walk. But it's like they have a sense, you know. She sent me out, and I knew I was supposed to wear them. I hated those shoes.
I love
just
those
one of
white
those.
bucks.
You did?
I did.
Oh gosh.
Like Bobby socks. I
Yes,
used to love
yes,
those.
yes.
I love
Yeah,
those shoes.
I had
I didn't
shoes
like
like
them.
that. I also
Yeah.
had something called white bucks. which
Yes,
yes.
like Oxfords
Yeah,
that
that's
were
right.
Yes,
white
yes.
That's
with a
right.
fuzzy
I was
hip
wondering what kind
finish.
of shoes is that? I don't think I've heard of that.
They were
Well,
lace-ups.
Yeah, you.
It was something
Okay.
from the 50s that was, in the ancient days.
Yes.
But what was so weird was in my high school, if you came in with brand new white bucks, you had an initiation. Everybody
Had to
stepped
step
on
on
it.
them.
but
Yeah.
that
It
still
was
happens
important.
nowadays.
It was,
Yeah,
it was
still
important.
happens, yeah.
That wasn't aggressive. It was important that they be dirty.
Yeah, yeah,
Being clean meant you were a goody goody.
Yes,
So you had to be a
yes.
little dirty. And nowadays teenagers wear clothes that's ripped to
Oh,
pieces.
yeah.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean,
Right.
At least I
And
didn't
those are
wear that.
expensive.
Yeah.
But my friends all came by and wiped their shoes on it. And when I went home, my mother said, "Oh my gosh, I'll polish those shoes." Don't even touch them. They've been anointed.
I couldn't even
Yeah.
wear jeans.
Oh, really?
I couldn't wear jeans.
Really?
Oh my gosh, they used to call them dungarees.
Right.
Well, yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
No, you're not putting those things on. Oh no. Particularly men will look at you. Oh no, I couldn't wear that stuff.
Wow.
Okay. I must have been a good 18 before I dared go to the store and purchase jeans. And then when I would see my mother, I would never put them on. I would
Yeah.
never.
You kind of knew what to do, what Mama liked and what she didn't like.
And you don't cross mama.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure. For sure.
I know some young people will take a shot, okay? But you don't cross mama. She was quiet.
Let me tell you, my quiet mom, the disciplinarian, oh my goodness. I'm in the boomer stage, and so we had to go and get our own switch. A switch off the branch. Take and hit our legs when we were doing something wrong.
Are you right?
Mama said,
You call
don't
that a
do
switch?
that.
Yes, yes, yes.
What do you call it?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. My we
She's
never.
never experienced.
My mom never used. My dad is the one who uses the belt, but this is really for extreme things
Yes.
that you'd like sneaking out late in the night. Oh, that's a no-no in my family.
We had
You
the belt
would-
also, but we had this when we
The
were
switch.
outside.
But that's
when
my
we
dad.
were outside, the belt wasn't available.
No, that's the pinching. That's the
That's
pinching
right.
side.
That's pinching. So your mother said, go get a switch.
Right, right,
We
right.
had the
funny.
belt in my house.
You did,
Okay.
yes.
But
And
my
I
dad is the only
complained.
one
I
who
said,
uses
I
that.
said that's brutal. This isn't the army. I didn't know the
Nowadays
word
you
child
can't do
abuse.
that.
No,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
And
true.
she said, but I'm not using the buckle.
That's what my dad. But my brother, he got smart. He would put magazines on his butt.
Oh, did you?
Until my father found out. He did. We didn't even know about it, but he would come out because when he uses that on usually it's just my brothers. I don't know why. They would come out crying out of the room, right? But my brother, he would be smirking like. I said, how in the world is he not crying? Because even if it's just two bells, for a little child, that hurts.
Yes.
Yeah,
that hurts. Yeah.
That hurts. Now I know why. I had some friends and they would say, my mom, and she's disciplining me. My mom didn't like what I said. So she made me take off my shirt or take off my pants so she could spank me. And I could never understand why. But now you just told me because she couldn't pat herself. Okay? She couldn't pat herself. So and now I got it. I got it. But my mother was famous for just giving you the look. Where you going?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
My mom was a disciplinarian. My dad was the one who, if my mom can't handle what's happening, she would go to my dad, and my dad would call us in the room. So it depends on what your crime is, if it warrants a belt or just a talking to, right? So I got smart too. I'm asthmatic, right? So when I start crying really hard, I start hyperventilating. So my mom gets scared and she would take me away from the room, away from my
So
dad.
did you use that?
Yes, all the time. All the time. I said, if my brother can do that, I can do this too.
Evil
So I never
child.
got belted.
Yeah.
Never.
Gosh. Oh, the
was
things
funny.
you did to
Yeah.
avoid mama.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay?
And when you get smart, my mother used to say, just because things pop in your head doesn't mean everything has to
Come out your mouth.
That is very good advice, as a matter of fact.
That was very, very true. All
gosh.
those and the jumping off the bridge, I just couldn't get, okay?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And when she would always tell me about who knew my address.
Oh.
But But my mother also gave me some really good advice.
Okay.
When I was like in junior high, when I was in elementary school, I knew all the kids because they
Okay.
lived right near me. But in junior high, they came from different neighborhoods. And when I got friendly with someone who I had not previously known, and they would invite me over to hang out, you didn't play anymore once you were past 12. And
Yeah, right.
my mother would say to me, you know, you're going to maybe see some new people, you know, like she didn't know this mother, and she would say, always treat everybody the same because you never know.
That's true.
And I never really understood it. It sounded like some code thing, like, well, you know, don't talk to strangers, like what
Yeah.
are they going to say? But I realized as I got older, you know, you meet people of all different, not just points of view, but ways of expressing themselves. And, you know, she meant really just be respectful wherever you go. And I always remember that, treat everybody the same. That's how she put it. I thought that was very, that's useful to this day.
That's what my mom said one time. She said, no matter how bad a person is, there's always something good inside it. You just have to learn how to bring it out.
Bring it out.
Yes. So, yeah,
And I was the one that would say, well, how do I do that?
Yes. But you learn, you know, as you get older.
me, yeah.
And then she would say, I hope when you grow up you have a daughter
Okay.
and she's just like you.
Yes, oh my goodness.
How many times have you said that?
My daughter is even saying that now for her daughter.
How many times do you say that?
Yes.
And now what I say to my daughter when she's going through a lot of issues, I go, I told you.
Or I would say, I wish I could tell you, I told you so.
That's right. That's
And
right.
and then she's going to say, you just did.
That's right. The things we pass down.
Yes,
Okay.
it is so true.
And I know the 1, 2, 3 is passed down because my daughter uses it on her children. Okay.
My daughter,
What do you mean the 1, 2, 3?
you know,
When I get the 3,
Yes, okay. Yes.
so here's
exactly.
here's a funny story. So when my grandchildren were small, and my daughter was over at the house, and she would come over and she would bring the children's pajamas because they would stay late, right? So she would change them into their pajamas. They would take a bath, and she didn't do the changing. She let her husband do the changing. Okay, so they were so used to hearing 1, 2, 3. So my daughter took the youngest one out of the tub, and she said, "Go let your father dry you off." He goes to his dad, and his dad said, "You're big enough. You dry yourself off." My grandson said, 1.
Are you serious? That's so funny.
Okay.
And his father, you know, my son-in-law just looked at him.
Yes.
He said, 2. Mom was his third call.
That's hilarious.
Oh, that is funny.
And I'm going to tell you, he moved.
Yes.
He moved.
That was a good call for the show.
That is funny.
That is
But she was one for counting all the time.
Yes.
I wasn't a big counter. I would just say, do it, okay? But I did pick up the look from my mother because then I just would just look.
Yeah.
And I would pinch.
I didn't finish. But nowadays, the children, they just look back.
I know.
It's just not pretty. And I said, oh,
Doesn't
boy.
work, right?
No, it doesn't work.
That's frightening.
It's
That's
crazy.
frightening.
Yeah.
Because they answer back,
They do.
okay?
They do, yeah.
I was at my daughter's house, and her friend who lived across the street, my granddaughter came in and she goes, "Oh my goodness, what's her name just answered her mother back." I told her, "Ooh, it wouldn't have been my mom."
For sure.
Wouldn't have been my mom. If she said no, it's no, okay?
Yeah.
And they don't even bother to negotiate with my daughter. There is no negotiations.
No.
I used to tell my children, this is not a democracy. Okay, so don't look for
Right.
equal treatment.
Yeah.
Okay, what I say goes. So, and my mother would never say that. She would just say, "Not in this house."
Yeah. Yes, I've heard that too.
Okay, not in this house. Don't you go in that refrigerator? Did you ask?
Yes,
Don't be
yes.
opening the door to let the air out,
Yes, I hear you.
to let the cold air out. And that was the biggest, because I could never understand that until I got older.
Yeah.
And I remember that some people had icebox.
Yes.
Yes.
So I could
remember that
understand
too.
why you didn't want the door open. But my mother never told us that. She would
Right.
just say, don't be going in and out of that refrigerator. Know what you want before you go in there.
For sure.
My neighbors had ice boxes.
Yeah.
But we always had a refrigerator, even back in the 40s when I was a little kid.
Did you?
And it sort of was like, you were like a little bit, a quarter of an inch better than
That's right.
people who
That's
had
right.
ice boxes.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
We had icebox too. We also had coal that we had to shovel in for the heat.
Oh, you're kidding.
I'm dating myself. But that's a long time ago. I remember that as a little
Where'd you
girl.
live? That's just
In Newark, New Jersey.
Really?
Oh,
Yes,
wow, right
absolutely.
here.
In the basement, they had this big furnace, and we had coal delivered, and we had to shovel in the coal.
Wow.
Wow.
It doesn't
Wow.
exist anymore, right?
No.
Wow. Wow. That is very interesting.
All I remember is my mom just tells us, just be kind to people because they will be kind to you.
Yes.
So, and she said, never underestimate the power of prayer. So,
Okay.
because, sometimes things happen and you don't want to tell your parents, you don't want them to worry. But so when they learn about it, they get upset and said, we could have prayed for that person. Said, never underestimate the power
Yeah.
of prayer.
But sometimes I would be nervous about telling my mother
Yeah.
things because
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going to come out of her mouth.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And at that time, I was more concerned about what came out of her mouth than her hearing what I had to say.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, teenagers always keep,
That's true.
stuff. And some of the stuff she probably would have been horrified.
I'm quite sure.
Nowadays,
I'm
yeah.
quite sure.
Wow.
Ladies, I'm being given the signal
Oh, okay.
that we're out of time.
Oh,
Okay, I know. I could keep
We
talking.
just got to know each
I
other.
know,
Yes,
right? But woven into the things Mama said, I've already heard you give some witty remarks. We had some wise insights and reflections that were shaped by life. Okay, and many of these life lessons are still going on today, and I'm quite sure you pass them down to your children. But I want to say thank you all for participating and sharing some things Mama said. I'm now thinking back to Coles. Shoveling coal. I never had to do that, but I do remember those big black pieces
yes,
of coal. I do
yes,
remember that.
exactly.
So should you have a topic, I want to thank you and I want to thank our audience. And I say, should you have a topic you wish to share or you want to participate on the show, send me an email to colesj7@gmail.com. And I want to thank the PCTV crew and the interns. Thank you so much. And remember, no matter what, women talk about everything, anything, anytime, and anywhere.